So I think very often when we read or watch these stories about Casanovas, Lotharios, Don Juans, fuckboys,
Mhm.
they're often told from the perspective of the guy,
Yeah.
right? What he's going through, any kind of regret he feels or shame he might feel about how he's behaving.
Hmm.
Very often, there's some exploration or hint at whatever traumas he's been through that have turned him into a guy who behaves this way.
Hmm.
And, it's all interesting and useful. And we've gotten a lot of great literature and art from that. But I think rarely are those stories told in a way that reflects the humanity, the nuance, the depth and complexities of the women who are involved with
Hmm.
that guy. And I was reading a book about a womanizer, and it was told from his perspective, and each chapter was told from his perspective.
Mm.
And the women were, they were interesting characters, they were fleshed out, but they served his plot,
Right.
right? Sometimes they fit into types that we're all very familiar with in those types of narratives,
Mm.
saying the types of things to him that we see women say in those types of narratives. And I just had this moment of feeling like, I want to hear from the women.
Mm.
I want to um I want to see what's going on in their lives outside of him. I want to know how, I want to see, because I've experienced it, right? All women have to some extent. I want to see what it's like when he's not in the room, when he
Hmm.
walks out. I think that uh very often stories that are told about women fit into nicely packaged categories, or they're crazy or whatever else,
Hmm.
and they don't allow us the dimension um, that we have, especially in stories about relationships. And so
Mm.
my goal was, I'm going to turn the tables. We're going to get that narrative about that playboy, but we're going to get that narrative from the perspective of the women. So
Mm.
each woman has a different chapter. Some of them have more than one chapter.
Right.
And the idea is not only this is what this relationship feels like, looks like, this is the experience of this type of relationship from the woman's perspective,
Hmm.
right? This is how it feels. This is how she thinks. This is why she's involved. This is how she's traumatized, or what's led her to be in a relationship like this. But it's also, this is who I am outside of this guy. This is what's going on in my life
Hmm.
outside of this guy. And so that's where the idea came from. Now, I experimented with not having chapters told from his perspective. There are
Okay.
just a few that are told
Yeah.
from his perspective. And it felt like I needed to do that so that readers would get a sense of who he is, right?
Hmm.
So he needed to, in my mind, have presence in the book. So there are a few chapters told from his perspective.
Yeah.
And then he's got a daughter, Coco, who kind of emerged late in my planning for the book. But once she emerged, Circus kind of became more important
Right.
because she became more important.
Yeah.
So her story is really about, a girl who's struggling in a lot of ways, in part because of her dysfunctional relationship with her father. And once she emerged and became as strong a character as she ultimately became,
Hmm.
I needed to flesh him out a little bit more, because her story really is rooted in uh, in that relationship with him.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting that she came later in your planning and your writing of the book because she gets the last word. I mean, she's
Yeah.
right. And
Mm-hmm.
again, without giving away the ending and all that, I'll probably say it 3 or 4 times, but the
Yeah.
last line of the book is so good. So good.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of the articles and interviews you've done have really been complimentary of your, it seems like a like musical language. I'm sure that's a
Mm-hmm.
cliche by now, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a great example of just like a flowing sentence. It starts with the word that, which
Mm-hmm.
your first grade teacher said, don't start a sentence with that.
Right.
No, no,
Right.
no, start a sentence with that because
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Thank
last
you.
build
That's
up. Oh yeah,
nice. Thank you.
beautifully done. So the book starts off with Maggie and Circus together. Maggie's stylish. She's a star of sorts, or she's at least plays in the band of a star. Tip, right?
Yep.
I want to see she's what, late 30s?
I see them both as 40.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a great, contrast set up where they're sitting like at the Chase Lounge or whatever, down in Miami, and
Hmm.
he's always chasing, women, and he
Hmm.
looks and he sees this woman he later meets as Luce.
Hmm.
She's like 25 and she's dancing, she's young, she's very,
Yeah.
very beautiful.
Right.
And Maggie, who, as you said a little bit about her, and she's such an interesting character because she's so strong, she knows what she wants.
Hmm.
Um, but she tells him the news, and she says, I'm pregnant,"
Yeah.
and he's out.
Hmm.
He leaves, and
Yep.
that really sets in motion so much of the book,
Yep.
from Florida to, kind of like the Massachusetts area, Boston area.
Yes.
Um, what in building Maggie's character, she talks. There's a line, this quote. So the difference between Tip and Circus, and Tip proposes to her semi seriously,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You think if she would have said yes, would he have gone for it, or he didn't think she'd say yes?
Tip.
Yeah, Tip.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see Maggie as I kind of based her on a woman named Cindy Blackman,
Okay.
who is married to Carlos Santana, has played with
Um,
Santana. She played with Lenny Kravitz. If you remember that video, "Are You Going to Go My Way?" The
oh
woman in
yeah.
the afro in the background. That's who I was sort of basing
Um,
Maggie on. So
oh,
I was
nice.
thinking of her as that type of musician, that she's like a musician that um all the other musicians know and admire and
Yeah.
respect, but she's in the background, right?
Hmm.
So she tours with a Lenny Kravitz-esque kind of character. That's kind of how I saw Tip.
Hmm.
So I think I saw that scene. So yeah, for sure, what you've said is true. Maggie is incredibly strong-willed. She knows what she wants. Circus, to her, there's an attraction there. She likes him, but she's one of the women who really doesn't need him.
Right. Right. Right.
And so, or isn't really, a better way to say it is she's not all wrapped up and
Yeah, she's not beholden to him, right?
exactly. And so I saw the scene where she meets up with Tip. They're going to Tip has a show in New York and asks Maggie to come and play with him. And he does propose. And I see him as somebody who, like, I imagine some of these aging rock stars, right? Who,
Hmm.
they're getting to a point that they've had plenty of women, they've had a nice life on the road, and they're thinking of those women who they really can connect with, and they really you know, uh, feel genuine feelings for. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to be, Lenny Kravitz or any of those kinds of rock stars, but I imagine, that there are moments of wanting a more meaningful connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think if Maggie said yes, that he would have gone through with it. I think he does love her. I think he
Hmm.
would. Now, whether or not he would like spend the rest of his life being faithful and
Sure.
what that marriage would look like, that's probably a separate question, but for sure, I think he meant it. Yeah.
A great quote from the book is that for Maggie, it was Tip had for her a mysterious link. No, excuse me, the other way around. Circus had a mysterious link to her, while it was more ancestral for Tip,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And just ideas, I guess, of like, I don't know, logical versus visceral.
I kind of looked at it like, Tip is family.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's a specific kind
Okay.
of love, and for sure, a love that could lead to a certain kind of passion, I guess, in romance.
Hmm.
But I think that Circus is the passion, is the sexiness,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
and I think that she loves, or she's drawn emotionally to both of the men, and that's what the difference is.
Hmm.
Like, 20 years from now, um, well, I mean, I would be giving too much away, but I could imagine Maggie being in both, those men being in her life 20 years from now,
Hmm.
but I don't think her relationship with Tip is gonna change. They're always going to be family. Because they've
Yeah.
worked together.
Right.
They've grown up together, right?
Hmm.
She's been a part of his posse as he's become this superstar.
Hmm.
And so I think yeah, I think it was a genuine proposal.
Well, I mean, there obviously the misogyny in our society that, sees women in so many different ways as aging, the same age, a woman would be the
Mhm.
same age as a man, but the woman is seen as aging when the man is not, right?
Right,
So I,
right.
so taking that into account, I mean, she's a, quote unquote aging drummer. But
Yeah.
there's a great scene where she, feels this rhythm as she plays, and something's kind of
Mhm.
off, but she feels the rhythm of the baby,
Right.
as she's playing.
Mhm.
You talked about Coco, who is Circus' daughter, and her first scene, she's getting a tattoo. She's a freshman in high school.
Mhm.
Kind of, I mean, amateur tattoo. She's trying to fit in with the other girls. Some of them are older.
Yep.
Gossip, and they're talking about sex.
Mhm.
And there are clearly father figure issues. She, at the time of around 2013, when most of the book takes place, the dad Circus had moved out 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And there's this really interesting scenes, squeamish, but I mean as a compliment, squeamish with like Mr. O'Rourke, who's the
Yeah.
seemingly like really caring teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, she's looking for love, she's looking for attention. I
Yeah.
think I think all of the above. The quote about her is, quote, she couldn't see herself,
Yeah.
right? So there's so much about identity. She's a
Yeah.
caretaker in many ways for her mom, Pia, huh?
Yes. Yeah. And you know, that was how I saw Coco.
Okay.
She's probably the character that is closest to me,
Mm.
a girl who's, you know, has really dynamic energy inside of her. She's feeling all kinds of hormones. She's starting to feel a sense of herself and what she wants out of life, even though it may not necessarily be clear to her.
Hmm.
And then she's got her father, who is clearly this charismatic, attractive, compelling presence that
Mm-hmm.
really does not seem to care about her, right? And she wants his attention. And then she's got her mother, Pia, who, yeah, is so wounded and so weak, that Coco has basically been, a caregiver.
Yeah.
I mean, Pia is not in that rough a shape, but she's like, they're like sisters. And
Mm-hmm.
P is
Exactly.
the wimpy, like, oh, can you
Mm.
make that, she's just needs Coco to rule the roost a little bit. And so the primary journey that we follow Coco through is a journey I think a lot of girls that age go through, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I'm having all of these feelings, I'm having all of these urges, I'm separating from, my identity from my family or what I'm learning, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting all of these signals from the culture about how to act, but some of it works for me and some of it I'm feeling like I'm resisting, but I don't know what to do about that. And so that's her journey. And so she has several chapters.
Right.
And in each chapter, I kind of upped the ante on her getting herself into risky situations in her quest for connection, because it's really what it's about, right? And so when
Mm-hmm.
you've got a father, and this was not me, I didn't have this father, but I imagine, right, you have a father who is a womanizer like this, um bringing women to your house, which is something that happens one of the chapters,
Yeah.
and you're trying to figure out, well, am I pretty, am I sexy, am I desirable? And this is what your model for masculinity is, and for
Mm-hmm.
male female relationships and what's considered attractive. It can be confusing for a girl, especially if she doesn't fit that.
Right.
And so yeah, but to me, like I said, it's really about connection, like you said, being seen. And
Mm.
so I keep throwing her out there and getting her into trouble as she's
That's for sure.
hopefully learning. Yeah.
Yeah. He is described as there's a lot of great moments in the book where especially the women will say, like, what did you see in me, like,
Hmm.
how did you see me, and vice versa,
Yeah.
with Circus as well, like, and I think of a line from a book about, like, when you start thinking about the beginning, it's the end,
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty
Hmm.
deep. And a lot of just like,
It
what was
is.
it like, when you met me? And
Yeah.
she was a beautiful star for Circus. I think he truly means it when he says that.
Hmm.
Pia is speaking about herself, and she it's, quote, he needed a home, so I made it.
Yeah.
She felt like she couldn't live without him. She got pregnant pretty early with Coco, and it was just,
Mm-hmm.
she became, like you said, she became not an absolute addict, but
Mm-hmm.
not able, like you said, summed up very well. She's more of a sister. She's not
Yeah.
a
She's not a
maternal,
parent,
not a
right?
parent, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's a scene towards the beginning too where, Circus is so charismatic. He's so charming. He's making friends. He's making dates. He's making,
Mm-hmm.
future bedmates with, people at bars, of course, but shit
Yep.
on the bus, on the subway.
Yeah.
Odessa becomes she's really important, especially later in the book. But she was involved with a married man who sounds like was killed by his wife,
By his wife, yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
she has this like a charm or a bracelet or necklace or
Mm-hmm.
something, and she's like, okay, shoot, how do I return it to the house?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Circus is like, I'm down, and he goes with
Yeah.
her and tries to make it happen so they can kind of slip it,
Right.
back into the house and all that. I thought it was just on a plot and just writing and interest level. That was a very interesting scene, man.
Thank you. It's funny. I've it's been interesting to me as I've talked about this book to like sort of make a list of like the characters that are most interesting to people.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And Odessa, she's like in the middle. People don't always bring her up,
Yeah.
but when they do, it's often from what you're saying. And you know, I'm proud of that little sort of plot, and I have
Uh,
no idea how I came up with it. I don't remember. Like it has nothing to do with my life. I didn't read
right.
anything about it. I don't know how I came up with it. But I knew that I needed to write, or I felt that I needed to write a chapter that showed Circus genuinely charming a woman,
Yeah.
right? Like taking a genuine interest in a woman and
Mm-hmm.
really being appealing. I
Mm-hmm.
think when he sees her, when he's with her, he genuinely likes her. He's genuinely attracted to her. And and his charm is not an act. And
Mm-hmm.
so I felt like it was important, because if you're writing a book like this or presenting a character like this, and there are people who I have talked to who didn't read it or didn't finish reading it because they just didn't like him. And I think if you're going to write about a character like this, it's got to make sense why these
Right.
women would be
Right.
so
Right. Right.
interested in
Yeah.
him. And so I thought, well, I need a chapter that shows how he can be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's how Odessa came to being. And again, I don't remember how I came up with that storyline, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad it came.
Well, I mean, as the book goes on, I mean, Circus has obviously been out of Coco's life for so many years. I mean, it's almost like when he has to watch her, she's a chore for him. He's
Hmm.
always pawning her off on the person next door, like, oh,
Right,
you like them, right?
right,
And
right,
poor Coco just feels like a cast off, right?
right.
There's a scene where she goes on vacation with her mom and some of the female family members on her mom's side. She explores her sexuality. She's drawn to the boy.
Hmm.
There's a lot of tension there. There's a really sexual menace of those boys. They're
Yeah.
really, there's not an assault. There's not, but it's
Hmm.
very intimidating,
Hmm.
to say the least, right? She's kind of shown not in contrast, but like maybe in contrast. I don't know,
Hmm.
Cressida or Cressida, her
Cressida,
cousin.
yeah. Hmm.
She seems to have, more ease with boys. She's older.
Hmm.
And while, Coco struggles with that, more she's just in her own head so much, right?
Hmm.
There's one of the characters is Angela. She um that's where we see, Circus. I was really the most mad at Circus. One of the most mad scenes was
Hmm.
that one where they'd slept together, they've been together, and she comes to see him at the club, and he just puts her down,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he's really
Hmm.
brutal towards her, which makes it even worse when we found out that basically her twin.
Hmm.
You write good soap operas too. Her twin
Yeah, I
basically
like a
betrayed
little
her, right?
drama. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then her
Hmm.
twin ended up with with Angela's husband, right? Or at least
Yeah.
boyfriend.
And it's funny
Ouch.
because like about a month ago, I was reading some advice column and it was
Ooh.
my sister is having an affair with my husband and they're about to have a baby. And it's like, wow. So I
Jeez.
didn't pull any, this stuff does
Uh-huh.
happen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
we talked about the theme of of aging
Hmm.
with Panos and the social media. There's a really cringy, and again, I mean as a compliment, you feel for Circus. It's like, he has this meeting that he's so looking forward to, New York bigwig, and it just seems like time is passing him by where he, thinks like, hey, I can get a deal, I can get a record deal, I can get, signed up with an agent and the whole deal. And I took it as like Peacock's the older guy,
Right.
he's the
Yeah.
money, I guess, right? And the younger guy is, he's like a hipster, and he's just very dismissive, like, it's not going to work. You don't have it. This
Yeah.
doesn't have
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
Then it doesn't work. And Circus is obviously very, very deflated, to say the least. I thought that Raquel was so well done that she's like 50. I think she's 50.
Yeah.
And I felt like she in some ways served as like almost objective measure of Circus. They'd been together, but they're still friends. She's exploring. I mean, she's got a female partner. I don't know how much she really was into him. Maybe she was. But she's just very objective about like, here's what you were like, here's what you're like now, and kind of gives them a barometer. I wonder about the character of Raquel and how she figured into your planning.
So, similar to the point about needing to demonstrate what it is about Circus that is compelling to women, that he is charming, that he is intelligent, that he is sexy, that he is genuinely interested in women and knows how to convey that in ways that are not only kind of beguiling, but also just genuinely attractive. It was also important that not all of the women were pining,
right,
and they weren't all pining at the same level or in the same way. That would be boring, right? And so some of the women, I mean, you've got a range. You've got one character who's pretty obsessed, right?
Yes.
To the point of not being able to really function. You know what I mean? And she's kind of at the end of her rope there. And
Talking
then you've got
Josephine, maybe.
Josephine, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got Maggie, who to me is like, yeah, I like this guy, and oh, now I'm pregnant. Well, I should probably tell him, right? She's not necessarily as wrapped up in him as any of the other women. And to me, Raquel, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but to me, Raquel is one of the women who's like, oh, sure, yeah, come by. It doesn't, I don't have anything else to do. Yeah, let's have a little fun, in the way that we have fun. And so that was, I mean, again, there were lots of different things I felt I had to do. One piece was, we still need an arc with Circus. So how are we serving his arc, which is this whole journey from, is he going to step up and show up for Maggie in this pregnancy? What's going to happen with the music? So each one of the women's stories, sure, did have to sort of push that arc along, but also, what's their own story. And for me, like I said, Raquel was one of the women who could take him or leave him. But I think she still was able to reflect something important about him as a character, and about those types of relationships.
Right.
And I think, her own story of, there is somebody she is pining for, and her own inability. And I think this is what you could argue is the emotional reality, the psychological reality for a lot of these characters, which is an inability to some extent to really connect, and to really be vulnerable or show up or do whatever it is you have to do to make the relationships in your life, come together.
Right.
And Raquel is similar to Circus in that way, but her love, her erotic life is not directed toward him, but he shows up and she's like, why not?
There's, as we talked about, there's a lot about the father-daughter relationship. You described him, like you said, I mean, he's a rock star. I mean, literally not a rock star, but, jazz star, and he's just larger than life. She always looked at him as more of like a myth or a legend, not a person, because you don't see him so often, right?
Right.
She even, goes to see Peach. Peach was a kind of a fling for Circus. She goes to see her at the bar, just kind of like, can you tell me about Dad? Can you tell, like, I don't know a lot about him, right? And, you talked about cries for help. I mean, the one involving the the 2013 Boston bombing was like, whoa,
Yeah. Hmm.
very serious stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, so much in the book about self-worth, about
Hmm.
traumas.
Hmm.
Circus is looking to be loved, and there's, I don't know, a 2 sentence or 1 sentence part of the book that is so deep. He talks about, well, the kind of the way my dad recognized me, Circus's dad, the way he recognized
Hmm.
me, he gave me this famous scar on my back with the
Hmm.
cigarettes,
Yeah.
right? And ideas
Yeah.
of like just taking action to compensate for not feeling right or not feeling good about himself. He finds women. There's always some action going on. So I wonder about that idea of him and looking to be loved. Is that too generous to him? I don't know.
No, I think it is. I mean, I think that's one way to look at it. I think another way to look at it is that mechanism is broken.
Hmm.
The mechanism that, and I think men, anybody, of any gender who is like this is true. Um, that there is a mechanism. I mean, I think I'll rephrase that. Part of my, I think, ability to write him successfully to whatever extent that I did was understanding. I get it. I get if you're an attractive, charismatic guy and women are really making themselves available to you. I
Mm-hmm.
can understand that it would be challenging to say no and that it would be fun to say yes. I
Mm-hmm.
totally get that. And I don't fault anybody, for promiscuity. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? In fact, there's a line that Maggie says that a lot of people have read back to me. She says, basically we're the same. The difference is that, you know, if people are going to be in my life, I'm going to show them some respect, right? And he doesn't really do that. So I think that there's a part of him that's just sexual and has options, and
Mm-hmm.
when those options arise, enjoys them. He doesn't have the ability, though, I think in his effort or his desire to keep distance and control over his own life and not get too intimate, that he mistreats women, right? Um,
No doubt.
I don't think he would see it that way, but I think, you mentioned the scene with Angela. I think one of his reasons that he comes down hard on her for showing up at the bar where he's
Yeah.
playing is because it's like, this is my space and I didn't invite
Yeah.
you into it. You don't have the right to do this. And you could argue that that's really shitty of him, but on the other hand, it is his space and she is encroaching, right?
Mm.
So I guess I would say that for sure there's a part of him that's naturally sexual, and if he was a kinder guy, maybe it wouldn't be so bad
Mm-hmm.
that he's had so many women in his life. But I do think there's also, like I said, a broken mechanism. And I
Yeah.
think um somebody like Peach just thinks he's cute and has an opportunity to hook up with him, and it doesn't
Mm.
really go well. And um but I don't think she's got a broken mechanism. You know what I
Right.
mean? Actually, she's going to be fine afterward,
Mm-hmm.
probably. But I think some of the other women, yeah, they're at a point where there's something kind of wrong, and the ability to connect, the ability to be intimate, to love, to receive love,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really work. And I think that's true of Circus.
Yeah.
And you know I've known a lot of people like this,
Mm.
and I think that that's part of what I wanted to explore. And I know, especially at this moment in our culture, that there's not a lot of sympathy for people like that, which is totally understandable. But as a
Mm-hmm.
writer, if I wanted to write this character, I had to find a way to understand him the way he does. He
Sure.
doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. He thinks he's being honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you what's available. I'm not pushing you. If you
Mm-hmm.
if you're not into what I'm offering, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot of, men especially like that. Like, hey, I told her that this is
Yeah.
all as far as it's gonna go. And there is some truth to that.
Hmm.
If he's telling you this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think But yeah, going back to your question, for sure, there's damage in there. The father, I didn't want to have, this happens a lot in books, like, here's the paragraph that explains who he is. I don't like that kind of approach to character
Right.
development. So just like a couple of drops, there's a little bit about the mother, a little bit about the
Yes.
father, even being a dorky kid who played a horn as a kid and being awkward and big, but then growing into somebody handsome, that probably has something to do with it. So there's stuff in there that I think explains,
Yeah.
why he became who he is.
Definitely. You mentioned Circus, it does seem like she'll be fine. She's a little younger, but
Mm-hmm.
right after her, she really does feel gross after the interaction. And, she's like,
Mm-hmm.
everything is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really well written but tough scene to read about, like, misogyny, like at her bar, her
Mm-hmm.
boss and a couple of the clients are really, sexually harassing her for sure.
Yeah.
Really sexually expressive or sexually, yeah, I'm sexually harassing her. And
Yeah.
there's the kind of the parallel line of Dottie Betgood is this woman. They're watching the
Mm-hmm.
news. She's this woman who, went through a sinkhole in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's on the news, at the bar. And
Mm-hmm.
the guys are horrible, the comments they make about her and
Right.
all that. And it's just like, ugh. All right. Pia talking about her self-worth. She talks about, hey, Circus, I want more of your world and less of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
you get to go out there and be crazy and do all this and see all kinds of people. And I'm the one who got stuck is not the word, but she does feel
Yeah.
stuck at times with her life,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, there's just so much in the book about how we recover from our traumas, music, booze, women,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And I think another angle to look at what you're talking about is, hold on, I want to say it, but I just kind of lost my train of thought.
No problem.
That Hold on, you can pause this, right? Because I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
say it. So this goes back to what we are talking about, why did I want to write this book?
Hmm.
All of these narratives we have about womanizers, playboys, Don Juans. Why did I want to write a book and flip the script and focus on the women? And this is exactly why, right? So the character of Pia, for example, the ex-wife who's still carrying a torch, is often portrayed as just this pathetic creature who just loves him and is weak. But Pia's truth is that is true, but it's also true, like, I thought that this was going to be meaningful. I thought that it would be meaningful to me in my
Hmm.
life, that I would have a sense of purpose if I made a home with you, if I made a home with, in the home that I created for you, for us, I would have some sense of purpose. And in sort of helping you achieve your goals, it would be meaningful for me. And she realizes that's not how it turned out,
Hmm.
right? For somebody like Peach, that character, a woman who's sexy, she's got a great body, she's not necessarily reading Russian literature at home, she's not the smartest, whatever. That character is often like cast aside, easily dismissible, because she's just a bimbo, right? That's what we
Hmm.
call that character.
Hmm.
But I wanted to show this is, and I'm so glad that you noticed that, right? This is what this woman's life is like. She goes to a bar, you have some slimy dude who comes into the bar all the day just to stare at her. You've got her
Hmm.
boss sexually harassing her. You've got these meathead, at least one meathead guy
Right.
who's trying to show off for her. That's what her life is like, right?
Hmm.
And I don't want to give away the ending to that story, but part of my goal in creating that chapter for her was to be able to retrieve that type of character from that narrative, right?
Hmm.
and and again, like, to show that this is what it's like on this side, right? So the circus character is casting her aside because he's had what he wants from her and she's not important to him. This is what that feels like. It's devastating, it's painful. And she has a moment where she's like, am I just tits and ass? Do I not have anything else to offer?
Hmm.
Right? Somebody like Josephine, and I don't, again, want to give that away because it's a very pivotal chapter, but, somebody who is being strung along, that is devastating. It's painful, and so part of the goal in writing the book was, okay, we've heard the story from the guy's perspective. He leaves and goes off into his life, and we never know what's happening for her.
Mm-hmm.
We never know how that really feels. She isn't just yelling and screaming. She isn't just eating ice cream with her girlfriends. There's stuff going on, you know? And so that was part of what I wanted to write too. So all of these moments that you're pointing out, that was part of the goal, right? This is what these women's lives are.
Without giving away the ending, you know, the scene with Josephine is very pivotal. And you know, as he ages, as Coco ages, we get to know, you know, about we get to know more about their relationship, with the ups and downs, peaks and valleys. Pia really makes an important decision, or a series of decisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she kind of meets this supposedly, you know, from the outside seems like a paragon of truth and
Mm-hmm.
wisdom in the Christian guy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then, you know, the ending, Coco gets the last word. We skip
Mm-hmm.
forward 3 years, you know, from freshman to senior, and especially with Pia, you know, she in many ways she finds her truth, or is on her way there. And what I
Mm-hmm.
love so much about this book is you talk about flipping the script. Like, it's not the usual way that people would usually applaud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even Coco's last day before she goes to college, that is, you know, it's really
Wait, you're
interesting.
saying too much. You're saying everything that how it ends. Yeah.
Is okay, well, I'll get rid of that. But just the idea of like really
Yeah.
flipping the script, I thought was so interesting. There are no easy answers, for
Yeah.
you as a writer, no easy answers for the reader.
Yeah.
Heck of a book. What a read. Like we talk about,
Thank
there's
you.
soap
I
opera
appreciate it.
drama,
Mm-hmm.
there's cool connections to like kind of recent history, even with
Mm-hmm.
like social media and some of the true
Yeah.
historical events, right?
Yeah.
And you know, this dying music genre, there's so many interesting books out there, and is added to the list of like of aging and what happens when we,
Mm-hmm.
you know, ideas of dreams and holding on to them. And then in the end, like you talked about, just connections, so
Yeah,
many
and
interesting.
that was part of it. I mean, I'm past 40, and so I know that life doesn't end at 40. But I
Nope.
think for a lot of people, especially creative people, there is this sense that if it doesn't happen for you, whatever it is, by 40, you're in trouble, right? And it hasn't happened for him. And while I don't necessarily think that the the crisis for him is about aging,
No.
I think the crisis is like, oh my God, 40, I'm supposed to do a bunch of stuff now and
Hmm.
things are supposed to be together. I do think it plays a big role, right? In you know, it's just like the ticking time bomb, you
Hmm.
know, it's um the sort of tool in fiction of like time is ticking away, you
Yeah.
know. And even though it's not like literally the bomb going off in the movie,
Hmm.
right, for this character, it's like, wait, I don't have the time to sit around and think about raising another child. And you know, if this is going to happen for me, it's going to happen now.
Hmm.
And so, but yeah, I think part of it is aging, but I also think part of it is just dreams and what the sell by date on dreams is, and
Hmm.
what happens when you think you've reached that date. You
Yeah.
know, who do you become? What do you do after 40, especially? You know, and I have faith in Circus that he will realize at some point that 40 is not old and he's got
No.
plenty of time ahead of him. But I do think before you hit 40, you're just like, oh shit, you know. And so that's why I kind of use that as a real engine for him.